Captain Dax Armitage leaned back in the threadbare captain's chair, which screeched louder than a politician avoiding taxes. I swear, this ship's a clunker in every quadrant, Dax muttered, tapping a boot on the console just for effect. The SS Reckoner wasn't the most glamorous ship in the fleet, but at least it wasn't a floating death trap, most days. Today, however, it faced the prospect of a shiny new title. Cap, you might want to see this, said First Officer Juno, whose capacity for understatement could put a black hole to shame. Dax peered at the main viewscreen where a flotilla of ships had appeared, gleaming like a teenager's over-oiled forehead. Well, if that ain't the universe's most aggressive light show, Dax mused, leaning forward with a creaky groan from the chair. No kidding, Juno replied. Those ships look like they're compensating for something. There they were, a fleet of God knows what, hovering like a bunch of interstellar mall cops ready to rain on humanity's parade. Their lead ship, a monstrosity of curves and jagged edges, sat front and center, large enough to make even the bravest soul question their life's choices. Nice of them to drop by unannounced, Dax said. I guess we're the main course. Juno shrugged. Better than being the dessert. A voice crackled through the comms, smooth as a politician's promise and twice as slippery. Attention, humanoid vessel. This is Curator Eslin of the Preservation Collective. We have come to ensure your species' survival. Dax raised an eyebrow. They sound like those door-to-door salesmen, except with spaceships and a slightly more impressive sales pitch. Captain, Eslin continued, your species is vital to the tapestry of life. Dax stifled a laugh. Tapestry, sure, more like a badly stitched quilt with a few loose threads. Appreciate the compliment, Eslin, Dax replied over the comms. But I gotta ask, what's the catch? There is no catch, as you say. Only the promise of eternal preservation. Eternal preservation? Sounds like a canned soup ad, Juno whispered. Eslin's tone remained unperturbed. You will be transported to a cosmic sanctuary, where your species will be safeguarded from external threats. Cosmic sanctuary, Dax repeated. That sounds suspiciously like a zoo. More like a theme park, Juno said. Humans. The exhibition. Dax turned to the crew, who were either staring at the screen or pretending to work on something important. Any ideas, folks? Silence, punctuated by the occasional beep of a console. Lieutenant Gribble, the ship's engineer and self-proclaimed cynic, piped up. Maybe tell him we left the iron on at home? Or that we're allergic to sanctuaries, Juno added. Captain Armitage, Eslin's voice broke through again. We await your decision. Dax rubbed a hand over a face that hadn't seen moisturizer in a decade. If I say no, do you just leave or what? Refusal is not an option, Eslin replied. We are prepared to enforce compliance for the benefit of your kind. Enforce compliance, Dax echoed. Sounds delightful. Think we can take him? Juno asked, her fingers dancing over weapon controls. With this bucket of bolts? Dax scoffed. More likely we'll explode before they get a shot off. Could always try diplomacy, Gribble said, scratching the stubble on his chin. You know, in case you want to bore them to death. Juno, hail the fleet, Dax ordered, straightening in the chair as much as possible. Let's see if our guests are in the mood for a chat. The comm channel clicked open again. Curator Eslin, Dax began, putting on their best diplomatic face. Can we negotiate a bit of breathing room here? Negotiation is unnecessary, Eslin replied. Our only interest is your preservation. Preservation, sure, Dax said. But what if we don't want to play along? What if we, I don't know, prefer living dangerously? Eslin paused, a silence that suggested either contemplation or a dramatic eye roll. Your preferences are secondary to the greater good. Ah, the greater good, Dax said. That's always a crowd favorite. Captain, Juno interjected, I'm picking up energy surges on their ships. Well, that's never a good sign, Dax replied, cracking knuckles that sounded like a bag of rocks being shaken. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Dax barked, slipping into the well-worn role of a captain about to do something reckless. And someone get me a coffee, this is gonna be a long day. What if they start shooting? Gribble asked, fingers already twitching towards the engine controls. Then we shoot back, Dax said. Unless someone has a better idea, like hiding behind a passing asteroid. You know, Juno said, they say discretion is the better part of valor. Yeah, Dax chuckled darkly, well, bravery is the part that gets you killed. The ship lurched as Juno initiated evasive maneuvers, spinning the Reckoner out of its lazy drift and into a more kinetic dance of survival. The viewscreen lit up with the swirling chaos of hyperspace and the looming threat of an alien armada. "Well, if we die, at least we know we were important enough to be preserved," Gribble muttered, his hands flying over the controls. "Yeah," Dax replied, watching as alien ships maneuvered with a precision that made the Reckoner look like a drunken barfly. "But who wants to be a footnote in someone's cosmic encyclopedia?" Eslin's voice returned, this time with an edge. "Captain, this is your final warning. Comply or face the consequences." Dax snorted. "Consequences? Please, I eat those for breakfast." "You sure about this, Cap?" Juno asked, her hand hovering over the fire controls. "Nope," Dax admitted. "But since when has that ever stopped us?" "Never," Juno grinned, hitting the controls. "And that's why we love you." The Reckoner sped forward, engines howling like an out-of-tune opera singer, as it zipped past the alien fleet. Explosions rippled through space, a cosmic fireworks show. "See that, Eslin?" Dax shouted into the comms. "That's our answer." As the Reckoner plunged deeper into the hyperspace rift zone, alien ships followed in relentless pursuit. "Think they got the message?" Gribble asked, sweat beading at his temple. "Oh, they got it," Dax said with a grim smile. "Now we just gotta survive long enough to tell the tale." Eslin's ships closed in, their intent clear. Humanity wouldn't escape this cosmic cataloging without a fight. "And if we don't make it," Dax muttered to themselves, "at least nobody can say we went quietly." The Reckoner's hull groaned under the stress of evasive maneuvers, a reminder that bravery often walked hand in hand with insanity. As the ship lurched again, Dax thought about the vast, uncaring universe and the irony of being considered precious by a group that saw them as little more than museum pieces. "Well," Dax said aloud, "here's to humanity. Too stubborn for anyone's good." The chase continued, a blur of speed and tension, with the promise of a new dawn or a spectacularly fiery end on the horizon. And somewhere, in the back of their mind, Dax couldn't help but wonder which was truly preferable. The viewscreen flickered, and the sight of an asteroid field appeared, a dense cluster of lifeless rocks that could spell salvation or doom. "Perfect," Dax said, eyes glinting with mischief or madness. "Let's see if they can dance." "You sure about this, Dax?" Juno asked, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. "Not even a little," Dax replied, steering the Reckoner into the roiling chaos of the asteroid field. The ship wove through the tumbling debris, each near miss a triumph of recklessness over reason. Behind them, the alien fleet was less nimble, their elegant ships struggling to keep pace. "Looks like they're not as good at this as they thought," Gribble chuckled, his tone a mix of relief and disbelief. "Guess they don't teach asteroid dodging at Alien Academy," Dax quipped. "Or maybe they just don't have a death wish," Juno added. Dax's smile was grim as the Reckoner twisted through the final cluster of rocks, emerging into open space with the alien fleet still struggling to follow. "Well, that was invigorating," Dax said, heart thudding like a war drum. "Invigorating's one way to put it," Juno replied, letting out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "What's our status?" Dax asked, scanning the console for any hopeful signs of survival. Gribble ran a quick diagnostic, his expression turning from concern to mild amusement. "We're still in one piece. Mostly's good enough for me," Dax said. "Juno, set a course for the nearest friendly station. Let's see if we can lose our new friends in the process." "Aye, Cap," she replied, already inputting the coordinates. As the Reckoner powered away from the fray, the crew couldn't help but reflect on their narrow escape. "Think they'll come back for another round?" Gribble asked. Dax shrugged. "Wouldn't be surprised. But until then, let's enjoy the peace and quiet while it lasts." The ship settled into a steady course, the hum of the engines a comforting lullaby against the backdrop of space. Dax allowed themselves a moment of respite, savoring the small victory against the cosmic curators who dared to try and cage humanity. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and indifferent, but as long as there were humans like Dax Armitage and their crew, it would never be boring. To the Reckoner, Dax toasted, raising an imaginary glass. And to never being anyone's exhibit. The crew echoed the sentiment, their laughter mingling with the stars as they sailed on toward whatever reckless adventures lay ahead. The alien threat might have been postponed, but Dax knew they hadn't seen the last of Eslin and the Preservation Collective. They'd be back, with more schemes and sanctuaries, but until then, the Reckoner had other appointments with destiny to keep. And that was just fine with Dax. After all, a quiet life was overrated. Dax lounged in the captain's chair of the SS Reckoner, the trusty clunker that felt more like a second skin than a machine. It creaked and groaned like an old man getting out of bed, and Dax was convinced it would explode of its own volition long before any enemy fire could reduce it to space junk. Yet here they were, still defying the odds and cruising through the cosmos like they owned the place. "Captain," Juno said, her voice carrying that trademark calm that would make ice envious. "You got a minute? Not like I'm busy solving world hunger or anything," Dax replied, stretching their legs out and pretending they weren't anxious about the alien fleet tailing them like hungry wolves. "What's up?" Juno tapped a few buttons, bringing up a holographic display that made the bridge look a bit more high-tech than it had any right to be. "It's about the Preservation Collective," she said. Dax groaned. "Oh, them again. What do they want this time? A signed poster? Maybe some DNA samples for their creepy intergalactic scrapbooking? More like they're suggesting an upgrade," Juno said, smirking as if she just smelled something particularly pungent. "Upgrade?" Dax laughed. "What is this, a software update? Last time I checked, we weren't running on Windows." Juno chuckled, then grew serious. "They can manipulate biotechnological constructs. Imagine turning us into obedient little drones." "Great," Dax muttered. "So either we become part of their interstellar Stepford Wives Club, or we keep playing cosmic dodgeball." "Fantastic options. There's more," Juno said, lowering her voice. "Gribble's been running diagnostics since our little scuffle with Eslin's fleet. He's found something concerning." Dax raised an eyebrow. "More concerning than the time he tried to fix the engine with duct tape and a prayer?" "Much." Juno gestured to the display, where a cluster of data points danced ominously. "They've attached some kind of organic tech to our hull. It's symbiotic." "Symbiotic," Dax repeated, rolling the word around like a piece of gristle stuck in their teeth. "So, not only are they stalking us, they're hitching a ride?" "Seems like it," Juno said. "Gribble thinks it's a tracker, but it might also be influencing our systems." "Well, that's just swell." Dax pinched the bridge of their nose. As if piloting this metal coffin wasn't enough of a challenge. Gribble's voice crackled over the comms. "Cap, you might want to see this." Dax glanced at Juno, who gave a little nod, and they both headed down to engineering. The room was a chaotic symphony of pipes, wires, and Gribble's various coffee mugs, each competing for the title of most likely to cause a fire hazard. Gribble met them with a greasy grin. His hair was wild, like he'd been tussling with a particularly cranky vacuum cleaner. "Ah, if it ain't my two favorite cynics," he said. "You're gonna love this." He waved them over to a console where a holographic representation of the Reckoner spun lazily, surrounded by what looked like an infestation of tiny, pulsating organisms. "Meet our new friends," Gribble said, pointing to the wriggling things. "Friends?" Dax echoed. "They look more like parasites that just can't quit us." "That's because they are," Gribble said, his tone sliding effortlessly into sarcasm. "These little bastards are part of the Preservation Collective's biotechnological arsenal." "Perfect." Dax crossed their arms. "Do they at least buy dinner before they screw us over?" Gribble chuckled. "Not unless you're into nutrient paste." Juno peered at the display, her expression thoughtful. "Any way to get rid of them?" she asked. "Working on it," Gribble said, tapping his makeshift keyboard, which seemed more duct tape than keys. "But they seem pretty attached. Like an ex who just won't take a hint." Dax sighed, frustration boiling beneath a thin veneer of humor. "So, we're being tracked and potentially controlled by alien tendril creatures. What are the odds this day could get any better?" As if on cue, the ship's intercom crackled to life, Eslin's voice as smooth and emotionless as ever. "Captain Armitage, we are aware of your current predicament. Compliance remains in your best interest." Dax rolled their eyes. "Oh, goody. The universe's most persistent telemarketer is back. You could always tell them you're washing your hair," Juno suggested, smirking. "Tempting," Dax replied, "but something tells me they'd see through that one." Gribble leaned in, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "You know, Cap, if we can tweak the engines, we might just outpace these glorified babysitters. Send their symbiotic friends a middle finger on our way out." Dax considered it. The idea was reckless, which suited them just fine. How much time do you need? They asked. About as much as it takes you to make a decision you won't regret, Gribble quipped, already elbow deep in wiring. So, 2 minutes tops, Juno added dryly. Dax smirked. All right, let's do it. Juno, keep our guests talking while we make a break for it. Juno nodded and opened a channel. Curator Eslin, we're willing to discuss terms. But first, we need more information. What exactly does this preservation entail? Our methods are designed to ensure the longevity and prosperity of your species, Eslin replied, her tone as warm as a glacier. It is a gift. Great, Dax muttered, their voice dripping with sarcasm. A gift that keeps on taking. As Gribble worked his magic on the engines, the Reckoner began to hum with renewed energy. The symbiotic creatures latched onto the hull squirmed in response, either irritated by the vibrations or simply trying to hold on for dear life. Dax's fingers danced across the controls, syncing with Gribble's efforts. Punch it, Gribble, they said, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. The engines roared to life, and the Reckoner lurched forward with unexpected vigor, like a slingshot let loose. The alien fleet scrambled to keep up, their ships elegant but cumbersome in comparison. See ya, wouldn't want to be ya, Dax crowed, relishing the feel of the Reckoner surging ahead, the symbiotic hitchhikers struggling to maintain their grip. Eslin's voice crackled over the comms, a hint of irritation seeping through her otherwise placid demeanor. This resistance is unnecessary, Captain. You are jeopardizing your own survival. Funny, Dax shot back. That's exactly how I feel about your preservation pitch. As the Reckoner hurtled through space, the crew shared a moment of triumph, a shared defiance in the face of an overwhelming force. They might have been on a ship that was more rust than metal, but they were free, and that counted for something. All right, Juno, Dax said, exhaling slowly. Let's get ourselves to a friendly port and figure out how to scrape these things off our hull. Maybe even get a drink while we're at it. Juno grinned. Sounds like a plan. Any preferences? As long as it's not green and glowing, I'm game, Dax replied, settling back into the captain's chair as the Reckoner raced toward what they could only hope was a temporary respite. And Cap? Gribble's voice crackled over the intercom, a hint of mischief in his tone. Next time we decide to piss off an alien collective, maybe we should bring a bigger stick. Or at least some bug spray. Noted, Dax said with a laugh, feeling the weight of the universe lift, if only for a moment. Next time, we'll be ready. The crew settled into the rhythm of space travel, each member a cog in the chaotic machine that was the SS Reckoner. A ship that, despite its flaws and quirks, felt more like home than anywhere else in the galaxy. Dax watched the stars streak past, a reminder of the infinite possibilities and perils that awaited them. The Preservation Collective was still out there, still intent on their mission, but so were Dax and their crew, equally stubborn, equally determined to carve out their own path. Here's to whatever comes next, Dax murmured, raising an imaginary glass to the universe and all its unpredictability. And to never letting anyone put us in a cage. The Reckoner continued its journey, a beacon of defiance in the vast expanse of space, its crew a testament to the resilience of humanity in the face of impossible odds. And somewhere, light years away, Eslin and her fleet plotted their next move, intent on bringing the wayward humans into their fold. But for now, the SS Reckoner sailed on, a testament to reckless bravery and the enduring spirit of those who refused to be tamed. The SS Reckoner shot through the void like a middle finger to the universe, each star it passed like a witness to their defiance. For a brief moment, things felt almost normal, if you considered normal to be hurtling through space with a fleet of alien do-gooders hot on your tail. But hey, it was normal for Dax and their merry band of misfits. Dax lounged in the captain's chair, which wasn't so much a throne of command as it was a slightly refurbished lawn chair. They were flipping through a dossier of intercepted communications from the Preservation Collective, courtesy of a few subspace channels that weren't quite as secure as the aliens thought. Who would have guessed that a species obsessed with biotechnological superiority couldn't be bothered to change their passwords from 1234? Juno leaned over the console, her expression as cool and composed as ever. Looks like our alien friends are setting up shop on a few human colonies, she said, tapping the display that projected a series of planets, each marked with the kind of ominous red you usually reserved for overdue bills. Containment zones, they call them, Dax replied, their voice dripping with sarcasm. I'd call them something else, but I'm trying to keep my swearing to a minimum today. Cages, Juno offered, her tone as dry as a Martian sandstorm. Yep, that's the word. And here I thought they were all about the warm and fuzzy business of preservation. Gribble's voice crackled over the intercom, his tone as greasy as the space under the console he was probably fixing. Got something you might want to see, Cap. Let's just say it's not your average garden variety of alien horticulture. Dax groaned and pushed themselves out of the chair. Bet it's not going to be as fun as you make it sound. Only one way to find out, Juno quipped, already on her way to join Gribble in engineering. They arrived to find Gribble hunched over a monitor, his graying hair sticking out in every direction as if it was trying to escape his head and start a new life somewhere less chaotic. He gestured to the screen, where a series of blueprints flickered, schematics for one of the alien containment zones. Looks like they're setting these up on a few choice colonies, Gribble said, not looking up. Places with lots of people, easy to convert into whatever the hell the collective thinks is a good time. And let me guess, Dax said, leaning in for a closer look. These blueprints didn't come with a free gift card or an apology note? Nope. But the good news is, I've got a plan to throw a spanner in their organic works. Juno raised an eyebrow. Plan? Or half-baked idea that involves duct tape and wishful thinking? A little of column A, a little of column B, Gribble replied with a grin. We hit one of their sites, mess with their systems, show them what human adaptability looks like. Dax crossed their arms, considering the implications. So, not only do we sabotage an alien setup, but we also make it clear we're not just going to lie down and take it. Exactly, Juno said, nodding. Show them we're not the kind to go gently into that good night. Or any night, for that matter, Dax added. All right, Gribble, what do we need to pull this off? Gribble rubbed his hands together, the universal sign of a man about to do something either incredibly brilliant or incredibly stupid. We'll need to be quick, quiet, and just a little bit reckless. Lucky for us, that's our specialty. As the Reckoner veered off course, headed for the nearest colony marked by the Preservation Collective, Dax couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. Sure, they were about to poke a very large, very technologically advanced bear. But if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was poking things that shouldn't be poked. They slipped into orbit around the targeted planet, a lush green orb that looked like it belonged on the cover of a travel brochure, if it weren't for the fact it was about to get an unwelcome alien makeover. The alien structure was easy to spot, a sprawling mass of organic tech that looked like someone had tried breeding a greenhouse with a motherboard. Subtle as always, Dax muttered, bringing the Reckoner in low. Guess we'll be skipping past the welcome committee. Juno tapped a few more buttons, pulling up the schematics. We'll need to get inside, find their main control node, and give it the old reboot with a sledgehammer approach. Why not just turn it off and on again? Gribble quipped, already gathering the necessary tools for their little excursion. Because that's what they'd expect, Dax said with a grin. All right, team, let's go show these preservationists what human ingenuity looks like. They geared up, donning their somewhat patchy spacesuits, more duct tape, less actual suit, and made their way to the airlock. As they stepped out onto the alien structure, the air was filled with a strange hum, a low, almost musical vibration that set their teeth on edge. I don't like this tune, Gribble groused, glancing around. A little too much bass for my taste. Focus, boys, Juno said, leading the way through the twisting corridors of organic tech. We've got a job to do. The trio moved with purpose, each step careful and calculated. The inside of the containment zone was a maze of alien design, all glowing nodes and pulsating walls that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Any chance these walls are going to start talking to us? Dax asked, raising an eyebrow at the nearest organic structure. Let's hope not, Juno replied. I'm not in the mood for a chat. They reached the central control node, a towering monolith of alien tech that thrummed with power. Gribble moved forward, tools in hand, a gleam in his eye that suggested he was either about to do something very clever or very disastrous. Here we go, he said, popping open a panel with a satisfying click. Time to give these preservation folks a lesson in chaos theory. Dax and Juno kept watch, eyes peeled for any signs of incoming trouble. They didn't have to wait long. The alien structure seemed to sense the intrusion, the walls pulsing with a warning glow that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. Gribble, how we doing? Dax asked, their voice laced with urgency. Just a few more tweaks, Gribble muttered, his hands flying over the alien circuitry with a speed that would have impressed even the most caffeine-addicted programmer. The hum of the structure grew louder, a throbbing crescendo that made Dax's head swim. "Juno, get ready to pull the plug." "Already on it," she replied, her fingers hovering over the controls as Gribble finished up his adjustments. And then, with a final, triumphant twist of his wrist, Gribble completed his task. The structure shuddered, a ripple of energy coursing through its veins as the node flickered and died. "Now," Dax shouted, and Juno slammed her hand down on the release, severing the connection and leaving the alien tech to flounder in disarray. "Let's get out of here before they realize what's happened," Gribble said, already sprinting for the exit. The trio raced through the corridors, the walls now eerily silent, as if the very structure was holding its breath. They reached the airlock just as the first signs of alien response teams appeared on the horizon, streaks of light that signaled incoming trouble. "Go, go, go," Dax urged, shoving Gribble through the hatch as they scrambled back aboard the Reckoner. Once inside, Dax didn't bother to look back as they hit the throttle, the ship soaring away from the planet with a roar of defiance. Behind them, the alien containment zone flickered and sputtered, its systems in chaos thanks to Gribble's handiwork. "Score 1 for the humans," Juno said with a satisfied smile, watching as the alien tech struggled to reboot itself. "Think they'll get the message?" Gribble asked, flinging himself into a chair with a grin that threatened to split his face in two. "Oh, I'm sure they'll be sending us a thank you card any day now," Dax replied, settling into the captain's chair with a sense of satisfaction. For now, they had a victory. A small one, maybe, but a victory nonetheless. They may have been outmatched, outgunned, and outplanned, but they weren't outdone. Not yet, anyway. "Let's find ourselves a nice corner of the galaxy to lay low in for a bit," Dax said, setting a course for the nearest uncharted system. "We've given the Preservation Collective something to chew on. Now let's see how they like the taste of rebellion." As the Reckoner sped through space, the crew settled into the familiar rhythm of anticipation, each of them knowing it wouldn't be long before the next challenge came knocking. But for now, they savored their success, however fleeting it might be. And somewhere in the vastness of space, the Preservation Collective took note, recalculating their strategies, preparing their next move. But that was a problem for another day. For now, the SS Reckoner sailed on, ever defiant, ever unbowed, a testament to the human spirit and the simple refusal to be anything less than free. As the SS Reckoner slipped silently through the black void of space, Dax Armitage leaned back in their chair, contemplating the scale of the hornet's nest they had just kicked. In their experience, it was never a good idea to poke a bear, technologically advanced or otherwise, without having a solid escape plan. Unfortunately, solid plans were in short supply aboard the Reckoner, replaced instead by a surplus of duct tape and bold, sometimes reckless, ingenuity. Juno, ever the paragon of understatement, was already at work assessing the data from their little escapade. You know, for a group of aliens obsessed with superiority, they're surprisingly easy to piss off. "That's because they think they're invincible," Dax replied, absently tapping a finger on the armrest. "And there's nothing more dangerous than an ego that sighs. Except maybe Gribble with a wrench." Gribble, currently elbow-deep in the guts of the ship's diagnostics, snorted. "Hey, my wrench has a better track record than these aliens' containment zones. And a more charming personality," Juno added dryly. "How's our girl holding up, Gribble?" Gribble looked up, a little engine grease smeared across his forehead like a badge of honor. "She's purring like a kitten, if that kitten had a smoking habit and a few screws loose. We might need to lay low for a bit, though. That little stunt probably flagged us on every radar from here to the Andromeda." "Ah, the joys of notoriety," Dax said with faux cheer. "Everyone wants to know your name, but for all the wrong reasons." Juno's console beeped, the sound sharp in the quiet of the bridge. She frowned, tapping at the holographic display. "We've got incoming messages. Looks like the curator's fleet has taken an interest." "Interest?" Gribble laughed, though it was edged with a touch of nervousness. "More like they've got a vendetta now." "Well," Dax said, straightening up, "if they're going to chase us down, we might as well give them a damn good reason." "What's the word, Juno?" Juno scanned the intercepted messages, her eyes narrowing. "They're talking about recalibrating their constructs. Seems they're worried about us exploiting some weaknesses." Dax raised an eyebrow. Weaknesses, huh? Now that's the nicest thing they've ever unintentionally done for us. Yeah, but they're also stepping up their defenses, Juno continued. So whatever soft spots we find, they're not going to be undefended for long. Great, Gribble muttered, digging deeper into the ship's innards. So, we find a crack in their armor, and they've already slapped some intergalactic duct tape over it. Dax grinned, a determined glint in their eyes. Which just means we have to be faster and smarter. And maybe a little luckier. Not to mention reckless, Juno chimed in with a half smile. Reckless is our middle name, Dax countered. Or at least, it's yours, Gribble. Gribble shrugged, offering a modest grin. What can I say? It's a gift. Suddenly, the ship shuddered, lights flickering ominously around them. Dax's grin faltered. Gribble? Not me this time, he said, frowning at his readouts. Looks like our friends in the Curator's fleet have decided to make their presence known in a more direct manner. By presence, you mean they're about to blow us to pieces? Dax asked, already knowing the unfortunate answer. Pretty much, Juno confirmed, her fingers dancing over controls. But don't worry, we've got options. Run or hide? Dax asked, already bracing for the familiar chaos of a hasty getaway. Both, Juno said, flashing an all-too-calm smile. I'm setting a course for a nearby asteroid field. Should give us some cover. Asteroid fields, Gribble mused. There's a reason those things are used in every space movie chase scene. Yeah, because they're bloody terrifying, Dax replied, but a grin was tugging at their lips again. Let's do it. The Reckoner veered sharply, engines roaring as they plunged towards the asteroid field like a particularly stubborn housefly dodging a swat. Behind them, the Curator's fleet appeared on the sensors, sleek and menacing against the backdrop of space. As the asteroids loomed larger, Dax could feel the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with a tinge of fear. It was the kind of situation that made them wonder why they'd signed up for this in the first place. But then again, it wasn't like there were many opportunities for a career change in the middle of an alien pursuit. Juno, how's our trajectory? Dax asked, eyes flicking between the monitors and the swirling mass of space rocks ahead. Pretty good, Juno replied, her voice steady. Assuming we don't hit anything too hard. Comforting, Gribble muttered from engineering. Just keep her steady, Dax said, as if that was the easiest thing in the world. The Reckoner ducked and weaved through the asteroid field, each near miss a reminder of just how thin the line between life and death really was out here. Behind them, the alien ships weren't faring as well, their attempts to follow hampered by the same rocks that provided the Reckoner with its shaky cover. Looks like they're struggling, Juno noted with a hint of satisfaction. Guess they didn't plan for the terrain. Yeah, well, neither did we, Gribble said, clinging to his station like it was a lifeboat in a stormy sea. But we're the ones still alive, Dax pointed out. So let's keep it that way. The ship twisted sharply to avoid a particularly large asteroid, the inertia pressing them into their seats. Dax gritted their teeth, fingers white-knuckled on the controls. This was the kind of flying that separated the amateur hour from the real pilots. Think we can lose them in here? Gribble asked, not sounding overly hopeful. That's the plan, Dax replied, though the sarcasm in their voice was hard to miss. The alien ships were relentless, but the Reckoner had a lead, and Dax intended to keep it. It was times like these that made living on the edge a lifestyle choice rather than a mere circumstance. For better or worse, they were committed. As the Reckoner danced through the asteroid field, Dax couldn't help but feel a strange sense of camaraderie with the ship itself, a rickety vessel that, like its crew, refused to give up despite the odds. And then, just as the alien ships seemed to catch up, a particularly dense cluster of asteroids loomed ahead. Dax's instincts kicked in, banking sharply to the right and skirting the edge. The lead alien ship wasn't as lucky. With a crunch that reverberated through the vacuum of space, it clipped an asteroid, spinning off into the void like a child's discarded toy. That's one down, Juno said, her voice betraying a touch of relief. Let's see if we can get the rest to play follow the leader, Dax replied, guiding the Reckoner deeper into the field. The dance continued, with the Reckoner leading the alien ships on a merry chase through the tumbling rocks. Every movement had to be precise, every decision made in the blink of an eye. One wrong move, and they'd join the debris. But somehow, they managed to stay one step ahead, the aliens' superior technology proving useless against the unpredictable chaos of the asteroid field. It was a reminder that sometimes, simplicity and instinct could outdo even the most advanced systems. Finally, the field began to thin, the asteroids giving way to open space. Dax exhaled, releasing a breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding. "All right, let's get out of here before they regroup." Juno nodded, setting a new course that would take them far from the current chaos. "Next stop, somewhere that isn't here." Gribble chuckled, though it was tinged with genuine relief. Preferably somewhere with less chance of sudden, explosive decompression. As the Reckoner slipped away from the pursuing fleet, Dax couldn't help but marvel at their luck. Sure, they were a bunch of misfits flying a ship held together by sheer will and a bit of tape, but they'd survived. And in the grand scheme of things, that was worth a lot. "We're not out of the woods yet," Juno cautioned, ever the voice of reason. "Yeah, but at least we're not mulch," Dax replied, a satisfied grin spreading across their face. Gribble leaned back, wiping a hand across his forehead. "So, what's the next move, Cap?" Dax considered the question, pondering their limited options. "We lay low, keep our ears open, and see if we can find other cracks in the collective's armor. If they've got weaknesses, we need to find them before they patch them up." "Which means more sneaking and less shooting, I assume," Juno remarked. "Exactly," Dax said, nodding. "We need to outthink these bastards, not outgun them." Gribble nodded, seemingly pleased with the plan. "I guess that means more fun with alien tech, then." "Just don't blow us up in the process," Dax warned, though there was a lightness in their tone that suggested they trusted Gribble more than they let on. Juno chuckled, though the humor in her voice was tempered by the reality of their situation. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us." "Always do," Dax said, turning their attention back to the vastness of space. "But if there's one thing we know how to do, it's adapt. And if these aliens want to fight, well, they've just picked the wrong crew to mess with." The SS Reckoner sailed on, bruised but unbroken, its crew ready for whatever cosmic oddities the universe decided to throw their way next. In a galaxy full of threats and mysteries, they were determined to carve out their own destiny, no matter the cost. And as the stars streaked past the viewports, the crew couldn't help but feel a growing sense of defiance. The Preservation Collective might have technology on their side, but they had spirit, a stubborn refusal to be anything other than what they were: human. And in the end, maybe that was the only edge they needed. The SS Reckoner was somewhere between being a piece of art and a piece of junk, depending on who you asked and when. After their daring escape from the asteroid field, it seemed like her days as a galactic sculpture were numbered. But now, the universe had decided it was time for her crew to pay the piper. In hindsight, Dax figured that biting their thumb at the Preservation Collective might have been a touch overzealous. But who could resist a good chase, especially when you're in a ship that should have been retired to a museum, or a scrapyard, a decade ago? Still, there they were, bound and unceremoniously dumped in the sterile, featureless belly of an alien containment zone. No cot, no toilet, no dignity. It had all the charm of a waiting room, minus the year-old magazines. Dax leaned back against the smooth, cold wall, the universal symbol for, "I give up," except Dax never really gave up. "Juno," Dax said, breaking the silence, "remind me why we didn't ask for a brochure before signing up for Prison Planets of the Galaxy." "Would have ruined the surprise," Juno replied, her voice steady and dry. "Besides, you love a good blind date." "True, but I prefer them without captivity and aggressive probing," Dax muttered. Gribble, who was pacing the small space with the restlessness of a caged animal, snorted. "Should have put that on the profile. Dislikes. Long walks in containment zones, probing." "Good idea for next time," Dax replied, sarcasm thick as molasses. If there is one. The Reckoner's crew had found themselves guests of the Preservation Collective's tender mercies, which so far had been in short supply. The aliens had finally tired of the cat-and-mouse game and decided to reel them in. Dax imagined the Curator's fleet outside, a giant net ready to scoop up any loose ends. "So, what's the play, Cap?" Gribble asked, turning to Dax with a hopeful glint, as if expecting a master plan to unfold in the next few seconds. The guy was an optimist, an annoying quality Dax occasionally found useful. "We wait," Dax said, feigning confidence. "See what these bastards have in store for us." Gribble rolled his eyes. Great. That sounds like a plan a genius would come up with. A lazy genius. Hey, if I do nothing, maybe they'll just let us go, Dax replied with a casual shrug. Reverse psychology. Juno shook her head, a small smile playing on her lips. Sure, because that's worked so well for us in the past. Just then, the door hissed open and two alien guards stepped in, their faces hidden behind helmets that made them look like angry beetles with a superiority complex. They gestured for the humans to follow, their motions sharp and impatient. Dax exchanged a glance with Juno and Gribble. Well, folks, looks like it's showtime. The trio was marched down a corridor that seemed to stretch into infinity, the sterile white walls and floors blending into one endless loop of disorienting monotony. It was the kind of place that made you question if you were going anywhere at all, a fitting metaphor for their lives, really. Eventually, they were ushered into a large room, dominated by a holographic display in the center. The curator awaited them, resplendent in their robes, an amalgamation of biotech and arrogance. Their voice was smooth and patronizing, like a politician at a charity gala. Captain Dax Armitage, the curator began, and your merry band of misfits. That's Captain Dax Armitage, CEO of Bad Ideas and Questionable Decisions, Dax shot back, earning a withering look from the alien. The curator ignored the sarcasm, focusing on the task at hand. Do you know why you're here? Well, Dax said, scratching their chin thoughtfully, I'm guessing it's not for my sparkling company. A flicker of irritation passed across the curator's face. You're here because you've meddled in matters beyond your comprehension. Your actions threaten the balance we strive to maintain. Oh, you mean the balance? Where you play God with biotechnological constructs and treat everyone else like ants in a magnifying glass experiment? Gribble piped up. Juno elbowed him lightly. Easy, Gribble. Let's not poke the bear, unless it's through reinforced glass and from a safe distance. The curator's gaze swept over them, as if assessing whether they were worth more as prisoners or compost. You humans are resilient, I'll give you that. And annoyingly unpredictable. So, you're saying we've got a shot at being your favorite species? Dax asked, ever the optimist. Hardly, the curator replied, their tone sharp. But your knowledge of our weaknesses is troublesome. We'll be extracting it shortly, one way or another. That was the moment Dax decided that the curator's face would make a satisfying target for a punch. Unfortunately, such actions were frowned upon in polite company and alien detention centers. Instead, Dax leaned forward, a defiant smirk playing across their lips. I wouldn't count on that. We're a stubborn lot. The curator's eyes narrowed, a hint of frustration cracking their calm facade. We'll see. With that, Dax and the crew were escorted back to their cell, the door ceiling shut with an ominous finality. The silence that followed was heavy, the air thick with unspoken fears and uncertainties. So, Juno said, breaking the tension, any bright ideas on how to get out of this one? Not yet, Dax admitted, their mind racing. But something tells me we won't be here forever. I can feel it in my gut. Gribble arched an eyebrow. Your gut's the one that landed us here, Cap. True, Dax conceded with a grin. But it's also gotten us out of a few messes. As if on cue, a soft tap echoed from the wall behind them, a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost intentional. Dax's ears perked up, curiosity piqued. What the hell is that? Gribble asked, turning to trace the source of the sound. Juno tapped back, mimicking the rhythm. After a brief pause, the tapping resumed from the other side, this time more insistent. Well, this just got interesting, Dax said, approaching the wall with renewed determination. They pressed their ear to the cold surface, listening intently. The tapping continued, and Dax began to decipher the pattern, a simple code, reminiscent of the ones they'd used as kids for secret messages. Can you make out what they're saying? Juno whispered, her eyes bright with anticipation. Give me a sec, Dax replied, focusing on the sequence. After a moment, they grinned. They're saying, hope. Hope? Gribble repeated, incredulous. That's it? Dax nodded, a sense of exhilaration building. Yeah, and if there's hope in here, there's a chance for us to get out. Then let's figure out who's behind door number 2, Juno suggested, her voice brimming with determination. They spent the next hour working with the mysterious communicator, exchanging messages and deciphering codes. Slowly, a picture began to emerge. a network of human resistance fighters, hidden within the collective's very walls, working to undermine the aliens' efforts. Looks like we've got friends in low places, Dax observed, a sense of vindication blooming. Or at least, friends in equally crappy cells. The realization buoyed their spirits, transforming the containment zone from a prison into a battleground. The curator might have underestimated them, but Dax and their crew had a knack for turning the tables. Okay, team, Dax said, their voice resolute. Here's the plan. We coordinate with our new allies, create enough chaos to slip through the cracks, and bust out of here. Gribble rubbed his hands together, a mischievous glint in his eye. Now that's a plan I can get behind. Just like old times. Juno nodded, her usual understatement laced with confidence. Let's show them what humans are made of. With their newfound allies and a plan forming, the crew of the Reckoner prepared for their next move. Captivity had lost its sting. The challenge had been issued, and, once again, they were ready to rise to the occasion. All right, Dax said, a wicked grin spreading across their face. Let's make some noise. In a universe where the odds were perpetually stacked against them, Dax and their crew knew one thing for certain. They were never out of the fight. And, more importantly, they'd never be alone. With hope renewed and allies at their side, they were ready to turn the tables on the Preservation Collective. Because in the end, the humans had the one thing the collective could never replicate, a stubborn, unyielding spirit. And that, Dax thought with satisfaction, made them the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The SS Reckoner's crew had cracked the code, but deciphering a simple, hope, message was only the beginning. It was a bit like finding a spoon in a knife fight, not exactly what you need, but at least it was something to work with. The tapping continued, and Dax found themselves leaning against the wall, translating the rhythmic beats into something resembling a plan. So, they're saying there's a weak spot in the collective's biotech defenses, Dax relayed after another round of taps. Apparently, there's a way to disrupt their control over the fleet. We just need to hit them where it hurts. Gribble perked up. Finally, some good news. Nothing says, let's be friends like sabotaging advanced alien technology. Juno, ever the realist, raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do they suggest we do that? With our charming personalities and a can-do attitude? Not quite. Dax smirked, tapping the back of their head as if knocking a few brain cells into alignment. They're feeding us details on a specific biotechnological weakness, something about a frequency that scrambles their control systems. We just need to, not die while doing it. Piece of cake, Gribble said with mock confidence. Or, the opposite of that. The tapping paused, then started again, this time more urgently. Dax listened, nodding slowly. They say they've got a few sympathizers inside the collective. We'll coordinate with them to set off a chain reaction that'll turn the aliens' toys into expensive paperweights. That's assuming they have paper, Juno noted dryly. But okay, I like it. What's the plan, Captain? First, we need to get a message to the Reckoner, Dax replied, their mind racing. Gribble, you're our tech genius. Think you can hack into their systems? Gribble shrugged with a grin. I can try, just need to bypass their security. Which, judging by their password habits, shouldn't be too much trouble. Good. While you do that, Juno and I will work on coordinating with our new friends. We'll need to time everything perfectly to maximize chaos. Chaos is my middle name, Juno said, her understated tone belying the glint in her eye. Isn't it, Mildred? Gribble teased. Only on weekends. The crew set about their tasks with a renewed sense of purpose. Gribble hunched over the alien console, his fingers dancing across the interface with the grace of a pianist at a high-stakes recital. Dax and Juno huddled together, tapping messages back and forth with their mysterious allies. After what felt like an eternity, Gribble let out a triumphant whoop. Got it. I've got us a secure channel to the Reckoner. We should be able to relay the plan without alerting the entire fleet. Nice work, Dax praised, already preparing the message. Now let's hope the old girl is listening. Juno crossed her arms, watching as Dax sent out the details. And if she's not? Then we're screwed, Dax replied frankly. But let's stay optimistic, huh? Gribble snorted. Optimism is just denial in a party hat. The trio exchanged glances, knowing full well the stakes of their operation. The plan was hanging by a thread, one that could snap at any moment. Yet, Despite the odds stacked against them, they shared a common resolve born from years of shared failures and victories. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the room grew palpable. They were a ragtag bunch in an impossible situation, but they'd been there before. And just like those countless times, they were ready to give fate the finger. The tapping picked up again, signaling the go-ahead from their allies. The stage was set, and all that remained was to see it through. "Time to make some noise," Dax announced, the familiar fire of defiance burning in their eyes. "Juno, Gribble, get ready. We hit them hard and fast. No holding back." "That's the only way I know," Juno quipped, her calm demeanor masking a fierce determination. Gribble checked his equipment, a mischievous grin spreading across his face. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." With a collective nod, they moved out, each step bringing them closer to the precipice of their plan. The corridors of the containment zone seemed to narrow around them, as if the very ship was holding its breath, waiting for the chaos to unfold. The first signs of disruption came in the form of dimming lights and flickering screens, a prelude to the havoc Gribble had set in motion. It was the kind of chaos that sent the alien guards into a frenzy, their usual confidence replaced by confusion and panic. "Look at them," Juno remarked as they passed a group of bewildered guards. "Like ants whose hill's been kicked over." "Let's make sure they stay off balance," Dax replied, signaling for Gribble to initiate the next phase. With a flourish, Gribble activated the frequency disruptor, the device bathing the corridors in an inaudible pulse that scrambled the alien tech. The result was instantaneous. Alarms blared, systems crashed, and the controlled precision of the Preservation Collective's fleet descended into beautiful, unadulterated chaos. "That's our cue," Dax barked, leading the charge through the disarray. The plan was working, against all odds, against all logic. The Reckoner would be proud. They navigated the labyrinthine corridors with a single-minded focus, their path illuminated by the chaos sparking around them. It was as if the very ship was rebelling against its masters, siding with the humans in a final act of defiance. "Remember the last time we caused this much trouble on purpose?" Gribble shouted over the cacophony. "Yeah," Dax yelled back. "We ended up banned from 3 sectors and a whole lot richer." "Ah, memories," Juno added with a rare smile. "Let's aim for a repeat performance." As they neared the hangar bay, the final piece of their plan fell into place. The Reckoner, their junk heap of a ship, stood waiting, her engines humming with barely contained eagerness. She was their lifeline, their escape, and, in many ways, their home. "There she is," Dax breathed, a mix of relief and exhilaration flooding their veins. "Let's not keep her waiting." The final sprint to the ship was a blur of sights and sounds, a sensory overload that pushed them to their limits. But they didn't slow. They'd come too far, risked too much to let anything stop them now. They reached the Reckoner's ramp, the familiar clang of metal on metal a welcome sound in the chaos. The ship's control panels blinked to life as they crossed the threshold, each one a reminder of the countless scrapes and close calls they'd survived together. "We're in," Dax reported, securing the hatch behind them. "Time to fly." Juno slipped into the co-pilot seat, her fingers dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "Engines primed. Ready when you are, Cap." Gribble settled into his station, his usual grin replaced by a look of intense concentration. "Everything's online. Just say the word." "Everyone hold on to something," Dax ordered, seizing the helm with a firm grip. "Let's show these bastards what humans are made of." With a roar, the Reckoner's engines sprang to life, launching the ship into the void. The hangar bay receded behind them as the ship cut through the chaos, leaving the Preservation Collective's fleet scrambling in their wake. They'd done it. Against all logic, against all odds, they'd done it. Their escape was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, stubborn, unyielding, and often ill-advised. But it was theirs, and that was enough. As they hurtled into the freedom of space, Dax allowed themselves a moment of triumph, a fleeting victory in a universe that seemed intent on keeping them down. It wouldn't last, victories never did, but it was enough to fuel the fire for whatever came next. From their seat, Juno let out a relieved sigh. "Guess this means we live to fight another day." "Yeah," Dax replied, a wry smile tugging at their lips. "And to piss off a whole new set of enemies." Gribble chuckled from his station, the sound a balm to their frayed nerves. "That's the spirit. Where to next, Cap?" Dax considered the question, their mind already spinning with possibilities. The galaxy was vast and unforgiving, but it was also full of potential, and a wealth of trouble waiting to be stirred up. Somewhere warm, they finally decided, a mischievous glint in their eye. And preferably with a bar. Sounds like a plan, Juno agreed, the hint of a smile on her lips. The Reckoner sailed on through the stars, a testament to human tenacity and the infinite capacity for mischief. They'd cheated death once more, snatched victory from the jaws of defeat, and for a brief, shining moment, they were untouchable. In the grand tapestry of the universe, they were but a blip, a fleeting disturbance in the status quo. But to Dax and their crew, it was everything. A reminder that even in the darkest corners of space, hope could be found, and in the unlikeliest of places, a spark of rebellion could ignite. The Preservation Collective might have been the pinnacle of biotechnological superiority, but they lacked one crucial element, the human spirit. And as long as that burned bright, Dax knew they'd never be out of the fight. As the stars stretched out before them, endless and inviting, Dax leaned back in their seat, a satisfied grin playing across their face. All right, team, let's see what kind of trouble we can stir up next. With that simple declaration, the SS Reckoner and her crew hurtled into the unknown, ready to face whatever lay ahead with grit, determination, and the ever-present promise of chaos trailing in their wake. The SS Reckoner floated in space like a particularly ugly art piece that someone had accidentally launched into orbit. It was a miracle held together by duct tape and pure stubbornness, a testament, a clear example, of human tenacity. Inside, Captain Dax Armitage peered at the readouts with a critical eye, like a gambler studying a roulette wheel spinning his last chip into oblivion. Well, ain't that a sight, Dax muttered, staring at the holographic display that showed the curator's flagship. It was the kind of ship that looked like it could snort the Reckoner for breakfast and still be hungry for lunch. Big bastard, isn't it? Juno, his first officer, joined him at the console. She leaned over, arms crossed, her expression as unreadable as always. Think we can take it? Take it? Dax smirked, a devil-may-care gleam in his eye. Hell, I just want to dent it. Nothing like aiming high, Juno replied dryly, her tone matching the deadpan look she gave him. Gribble clattered in from the ship's bowels, hands smeared with grease and a grin plastered on his face. We're all set, Cap. Frequency disruptors ready to go. It'll scramble their systems like an egg in a blender. So we're betting everything on scrambled eggs? Dax asked, pretending to be more dubious than he felt. I hope they're not allergic. The plan was as simple as it was risky. Disable the flagship's control systems using a jerry-rigged frequency disruptor, then watch the chaos unfold. It was the kind of plan that only made sense if you were hungover, desperate, or both. Remember, keep it tight, Dax reminded his crew, the words more for himself than anyone else. Once that ship's tech goes haywire, we'll have a small window to make our move. And if it doesn't work? Juno asked, ever the realist. Then we improvise, Dax said, with a shrug that could have meant anything from, we die, to, we get really creative. As the Reckoner inched closer, the tension was as thick as the layer of grime coating its walls. The vastness of space was a silent witness to their audacity, or stupidity, depending on how you looked at it. Gribble, hit the switch, Dax ordered, the words coming out smoother than he felt. The tech genius obliged with a flourish, launching the disruptor into action. A pulse rippled outwards, invisible and silent, but potent enough to make the Preservation Collective's pristine systems spit sparks. Here we go, Juno murmured, eyes on the holographic display that now showed utter pandemonium aboard the alien flagship. Alarms blared, lights flickered, and the sleek ship began to lurch like a drunk who'd lost their last coin at the slots. The Preservation Collective, so damned proud of their biotechnological marvels, looked like a bunch of toddlers who'd just figured out they'd been playing with the wrong end of a hammer. We're in, Dax said, elation in his voice. Against all odds, the Reckoner had punched above its weight and landed a hit. Juno gestured to the screen, where alien ships around the flagship were breaking formation, like sheep scattering before a wolf that had suddenly grown fangs. Looks like they're falling back. Goodbye, and don't let the airlock hit you on the way out, Dax quipped, but his eyes were fixed on the unfolding chaos, mind racing. Gribble couldn't resist a laugh. Who knew that after all their posturing, they'd run at the first sight of real trouble? Arrogance and stupidity make for great bedfellows, Dax said, his voice a dry rasp. "And speaking of stupidity, let's not stick around to find out if they've got backup." The Reckoner turned tail, engines flaring as they shot away from the crippled flagship. The distant stars blurred, the ship's systems humming in a symphony of barely controlled chaos. They were riding the line between victory and disaster, and for the moment, they were winning. "Think they'll come after us?" Gribble asked, tapping furiously at his console to keep the ship's systems from overheating. Juno gave a short laugh, humorless and sharp. "Once they get their act together, sure. But for now, they're licking their wounds. We just bought ourselves some time." "Time to do what?" Dax wondered aloud, the weight of the question settling like a stone in his gut. The Preservation Collective wouldn't take this hit lying down. They'd regroup, they'd retaliate, and they'd come back with a vengeance. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, they'd managed to pull off the impossible and live to tell the tale. That was worth a drink, or several. "Juno, set course for the nearest human settlement," Dax ordered, leaning back in his seat. "Let's see if we can't find a place to lay low for a bit. Maybe somewhere with a decent bar." "You've got it, Cap," Juno replied, her fingers flying over the controls with the ease of long practice. As the Reckoner settled into its new course, Dax allowed himself a moment of introspection. The victory was sweet, but it was also fragile. They'd toppled a giant, but giants had a way of getting back up. "What's the look for, Cap?" Gribble asked, glancing over from his station. "Just thinking," Dax said, glancing at the stars racing past. "We've pissed off a lot of powerful people today." Gribble snorted. "Nothing new there." "No," Dax agreed, a smile tugging at his lips. "But for once, it feels damn good." Juno caught his eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they'd faced and the victory they'd won. It wasn't every day you outsmarted a technologically superior foe, and lived to tell the tale. As the Reckoner hurtled through the void, Dax felt a flicker of something he'd almost forgotten amid the chaos and desperation. Hope. It was a dangerous thing, hope. It could lead you to believe in impossible odds and foolhardy plans. But it could also be the spark that kept you fighting, even when the universe seemed determined to grind you into dust. "All right, team," Dax said, breaking the moment of silence. "Let's see what kind of trouble we can stir up next." The crew's laughter filled the cabin, mingling with the hum of the engines and the distant star's light. It was the sound of camaraderie, of defiance, and of a future that was uncertain, but theirs for the taking. And so, the SS Reckoner sailed on, a ship of fools, outlaws, and dreamers, with a captain who refused to back down and a crew that followed him into the abyss. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, with sarcasm in their hearts and rebellion in their souls. In the end, maybe that's all anyone could ask for: a chance to fight, a chance to laugh, and a chance to write their own story, even if it meant pissing off the universe along the way. As Dax settled in for the journey, he couldn't help but feel a peculiar kinship with the stars outside. They were distant, untouchable, and yet, in their own way, they were rebels too, burning brightly against the vast, indifferent dark. The Reckoner and her crew might not have been much in the grand scheme of things, but they'd made their mark. And as long as they had each other, they'd keep fighting. For freedom, for survival, and for the simple joy of proving everyone wrong. As the ship sped onward, leaving chaos and a hasty retreat in its wake, Dax Armitage leaned back, a satisfied grin on his face. They'd cheated death once more, and for a brief, shining moment, they were untouchable. But all things considered, and in the grand cosmic joke of existence, maybe that was enough. The SS Reckoner, in all its patchwork glory, cruised through the void like a junkyard dog with a bone. Its crew was a ragtag bunch, held together by shared desperation, a fondness for trouble, and a captain who treated every insane plan as if it were a 2-for-1 deal at the universe's most chaotic bazaar. "What's our status, Juno?" Dax asked, leaning back in his seat with the sort of casualness that suggested he didn't care if the world was on fire, so long as he had a good view. "Miraculously not dead," Juno replied, tapping away at her console. "Systems holding, and we're still in one piece. Mostly's all I ever ask for," Dax quipped, but his eyes flicked to the holographic display with the kind of intensity usually reserved for defusing bombs or evaluating ex-girlfriends. Gribble was busy in the engine room, likely doing something that involved cursing, grease, and the kind of techno-wizardry that kept the Reckoner one step ahead of the scrapyard. "Hey Cap," His voice crackled over the comms. We're running on fumes. I think the last time we filled up was back when I still had all my teeth. Get us to the nearest settlement and maybe you'll get a discount on dentures, Dax suggested, not entirely joking. How's the frequency disruptor holding up? Like a charm, though I'm pretty sure it's illegal in about 7 star systems, Gribble chuckled. But then, so are we. Dax couldn't argue with that. The Reckoner had a reputation now. Heroes to some, a pain in the collective ass to others, especially the Preservation Collective, who were probably nursing their bruised ego along with their bruised ships. Think they'll come after us? Gribble's voice was slightly nervous, a crack in his usual bravado. Probably, Dax said, shrugging as if the question bored him. But not today. Today, we celebrate. Celebrate? Juno arched an eyebrow, her skepticism as sharp as a laser scalpel. With what? Rations and recycled air? With the undeniable fact that we're still breathing, Dax retorted. I don't know about you, but I call that a win. The crew of the Reckoner had faced the odds and come out on top. Now they just needed to decide what the hell they were going to do next. Because taking on the Preservation Collective was like poking a sleeping bear with a stick. Sooner or later, it was going to wake up, and Dax had no intention of becoming bear food. What's the plan, Cap? Gribble asked, rejoining them on the bridge, wiping his greasy hands on a cloth that might once have been a shirt. Find a place to lay low, lick our wounds, and figure out what our next move is, Dax said, ticking off points on his fingers. In that order, you think any place is safe for us now? Juno asked, her voice carrying the weight of a realist who'd seen too many dreams dashed against the rocks of reality. Dax shrugged, a gesture that managed to be equal parts dismissive and confident. Safe is a relative term. Besides, when have you ever known me to play it safe? You've got a point there, Juno admitted, a reluctant smile tugging at her lips. Where to, then? How about Onder Station? Gribble suggested. I hear they have good repairs and better booze. And a reputation for harboring fugitives, Dax noted, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Sounds perfect. With their destination set, the Reckoner altered course, the stars shifting around them like an ever-changing backdrop to a story that was still being written. And what a story it was. A tale of audacity, rebellion, and the kind of reckless courage that usually got people killed. Think we'll ever get used to this? Gribble asked, looking out at the streaking stars. Used to what? Running for our lives? Juno snorted. I certainly hope not. It's the thrill that keeps us alive. Speak for yourself, Gribble muttered. I'd kill for a quiet day. You'd be bored out of your mind, Dax interjected, giving him a knowing look. Besides, where's the fun in that? Gribble rolled his eyes but didn't argue. Deep down, they all knew that the chaos, the danger, it was what made them feel alive. Even if it also made them wish for a good, long nap. As Onder Station loomed into view, a sprawling hub of activity and dubious legality, Dax felt a knot of tension begin to unwind. Here, at least, they wouldn't be judged for their past deeds. Everyone at Onder had a history, and none of it was pretty. Welcome to Onder Station, Juno announced with a mockery of grandeur. Where dreams go to die and nightmares come to party. Sounds like home, Dax said with a grin, steering the Reckoner into a docking bay that looked like it had seen better days, much like the Reckoner itself. Once docked, the crew disembarked, stretching limbs stiff from too many hours in cramped quarters. The air on Onder smelled of ozone and opportunity, a heady mix that made Dax's heart beat just a little faster. All right, team, Dax said, gathering them around. Let's get what we need in terms of repairs and supplies. And try not to get into too much trouble. Define too much trouble, Juno said, crossing her arms with a look that suggested she was already plotting. Nothing that gets us shot at, Dax clarified, knowing full well that trouble had a way of finding them, regardless of their intentions. Gribble was already eyeing a stall selling tech parts of questionable origin. Think they have anything that won't explode upon activation? Only one way to find out, Dax replied, clapping him on the shoulder. Go nuts. As the crew dispersed, Dax took a moment to breathe in the frenetic energy of the station. Here, they weren't heroes or fugitives. They were just another group of misfits trying to make their way in a universe that was indifferent at best and hostile at worst. The marketplace was a cacophony of sound and color, vendors hawking everything from alien trinkets to weapons that probably violated several interstellar treaties. It was a place where credits spoke louder than morals, and Dax found it strangely comforting. Juno sidled up to him, eyes scanning the crowd with a wariness born of experience. "What's our long-term plan, Dax? We can't run forever." "No," Dax agreed, his gaze distant as he considered their options. "But we can damn well try until we figure out how to hit back harder. And if we can't, then we make sure our story's a good one," Dax said, shooting her a roguish grin. Juno huffed a laugh, the sound both exasperated and fond. "You'd find a silver lining in a supernova, wouldn't you?" "Why not?" Dax shrugged. "The universe is too dark not to look for the light." As they wandered the market, Dax couldn't shake the feeling that this was the calm before the storm, a brief respite in a sea of turmoil. But for now, that was enough. Back on the Reckoner, Gribble was elbow-deep in the ship's innards, muttering to himself as he tinkered with something that looked suspiciously like an improvised explosive device. "You think we'll get out of this one alive, Cap?" he asked, not bothering to look up. "Don't we always?" Dax replied, leaning against the bulkhead. "Did I hear someone say, improvised explosive?" Juno chimed in, entering the room with a mock frown. "Because I'm not cleaning up the mess." "Relax," Gribble said, waving a dismissive hand. "It's only an explosive if you press the wrong button." "And knowing you?" Juno smirked, arching an eyebrow. "Hey, I've got a good track record," Gribble protested, though he didn't sound all that convincing. "Right," Juno said, drawing out the word with the kind of skepticism usually reserved for politicians and used car salesmen. "Just don't blow us up, okay?" "Scout's honor," Gribble promised, crossing his heart with a grease-stained finger. Dax shook his head, a grin playing on his lips. For all their banter and bickering, this crew was his family, a dysfunctional, unpredictable family, but a family nonetheless. And he'd do whatever it took to keep them safe. With their business on Understation concluded, the Reckoner once again set off into the stars, a ship on the edge of chaos, driven by desperation and an indomitable will to survive. Dax sat in his captain's chair, feet propped up, as the ship's systems hummed around him. "What's on your mind, Cap?" Juno asked, settling into her seat with the ease of long familiarity. "Just thinking about our next move," Dax admitted, staring at the stars zipping past. "The collective won't stay down for long." "No," Juno agreed, her voice thoughtful. "But we've shown them we're not to be underestimated. That's something." A comfortable silence fell, the sort that only came from shared battles and hard-won victories. The Reckoner might not be the safest place in the galaxy, but it was home. For better or worse, they'd carved out their place among the stars. As they sailed onward, leaving Understation behind, Dax couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to turn the tables on the collective for good. Whatever happened, they would face it together, with sarcasm, grit, and a stubborn refusal to back down. Because in the end, that was what made them the crew of the SS Reckoner. And that, Dax decided, was more than enough.